Picture this. Deep beneath the ancient stones of Jerusalem, a simple wooden cup sits in darkness, waiting. For 2,000 years, it has held the greatest secret in human history. The last drops of wine that touched the lips of Jesus Christ still stain its rim, and somewhere in that sacred wood lies the DNA of God Himself. But what would happen if tomorrow morning someone actually found it? Welcome to our channel, where we explore forbidden questions and hidden truths of history, religion, and the unknown. If you love journeys that challenge what you thought you knew, make sure to join us, because today's story may change the way you see everything. Tonight, we step into that upper room in Jerusalem, where 13 men gathered for a meal that would split history in two. The year is 33 AD, and nobody knows that the simple cup on their table will become the most hunted treasure in human history. Chapter 1. The Last Supper's Secret. The oil lamps flicker against the stone walls as Jesus lifts the cup with trembling hands. Around the wooden table, 12 men lean forward, not knowing they are about to witness the birth of Christianity's greatest mystery. The cup is nothing special to look at, just clay and wood, made by some forgotten potter in Jerusalem's markets. But in this moment, it becomes something else entirely. "This is my blood," Jesus whispers, his voice heavy with knowledge of what comes next. The wine inside the cup catches the lamplight like liquid rubies. Each apostle watches as their master drinks, then passes the vessel around the circle. Peter's rough fisherman hands shake as he takes it. John, the youngest, stares into the dark wine as if trying to see the future. What none of them realize is that this simple act, this sharing of wine from a humble cup, will create the most powerful legend the world has ever known. The cup touches each man's lips, carrying with it the taste of eternity. Judas drinks last, and when he sets it down, his eyes are already planning betrayal. The disciples talk in hushed voices about kingdoms and glory, but Jesus knows the truth. Tomorrow, Roman nails will pierce his hands. Tomorrow, this cup will disappear into history, and for the next 2,000 years, kings will die searching for it. Knights will quest across continents for it, and treasure hunters will spend their lives dreaming of it. But tonight, it's just a cup on a table, holding wine and secrets. Chapter 2. Blood, Betrayal, and a Missing Cup. The morning sun rises red over Jerusalem as Roman soldiers march through the narrow streets. In the upper room, the cup sits abandoned, still stained with wine from the night before. But where is it now, as Jesus hangs dying on a cross just outside the city walls? Joseph of Arimathea, one of the secret followers of Jesus, watches from the shadows as blood drips from the Savior's wounds. This wealthy man, who sits on the Jewish council by day and follows Jesus by night, makes a choice that will echo through history. Some say he catches the holy blood in that same cup from the upper room. Others whisper that he uses it to collect the water that flows from Jesus' pierced side. Picture this moment. A rich man kneels in the dirt beneath a Roman cross, holding a simple cup as the life of God Himself drains away. The soldiers don't stop him. Why would they care about one more grieving follower? But Joseph knows what he holds. This isn't just blood and water. This is the physical proof that God walked among men. As darkness falls over Jerusalem, Joseph wraps Jesus' body and places it in his own tomb. But what happens to the cup? Ancient legends say Joseph takes it with him when he flees Jerusalem. Some stories claim he sails to Britain, carrying the Grail to the misty island of Glastonbury. Others say he hides it in the desert, waiting for the right time to reveal its power. The truth is, nobody knows. The cup vanishes from history like morning mist, leaving behind only whispers and dreams. For 2,000 years, it becomes Christianity's greatest mystery, more precious than any crown, more sought after than any treasure. The Holy Grail passes into legend, but somewhere in the world, it waits. Chapter 3: The Discovery That Changes Everything. Dr. Sarah Chen wipes sweat from her forehead as she crawls deeper into the cave near Jerusalem. Her team has been digging here for 3 months, finding nothing but pottery shards and old coins. But today feels different. Today, her metal detector won't stop beeping. 20 feet underground, hidden behind a wall that crumbled centuries ago, her flashlight catches something that makes her heart stop. There, sitting in a carved stone niche like it was placed there yesterday, is a cup. Not gold or silver, just simple wood and clay, exactly like the gospel descriptions. But carved around its rim are words in ancient Aramaic, "In remembrance of me." Dr. Chen's hands shake as she photographs every angle. The wood shows signs of incredible age, darkened and hardened by time. But there are stains too, dark marks that could be wine, could be blood, could be nothing, or could be everything. Within hours, the greatest authentication process in history begins. Carbon dating specialists fly in from 3 different countries. DNA experts arrive with equipment worth millions. Religious scholars argue over ancient languages, while archaeologists map every grain of sand in the cave. The world holds its breath as test after test confirms the impossible. The wood dates to the 1st century. The stains contain human blood. The Aramaic words match perfectly with phrases Jesus spoke in the Gospels. Even the shape and size fit descriptions from ancient texts that few people have ever read. But here's what nobody expects. The preliminary DNA results show something in that blood that shouldn't be possible. Something that will either prove Christianity true or tear it apart forever. Chapter 4: Vatican Trembles. Cardinal Martinez hasn't slept in 3 days. Behind the locked doors of the Sistine Chapel, 37 of the world's most powerful religious leaders debate in voices that echo off Michelangelo's ceiling. The Pope sits in silence, holding a report that could change everything the Catholic Church teaches. "If this cup is real," Cardinal Martinez whispers, "then every relic we've blessed for 1,000 years might be fake." Around the table, men who have devoted their lives to faith now face the possibility that faith itself might become fact. And somehow, that's more terrifying than any doubt they've ever faced. The Protestant churches are splitting already. Some pastors preach that the Grail proves God's love is real. Others declare that faith needs no proof, and this discovery is Satan's trick to confuse believers. Phone calls flood in from every corner of Christianity, begging for answers the Vatican doesn't have. But the real fear runs deeper. If this cup is authentic, then Christianity isn't just one religion among many. It becomes the religion with physical proof. That changes everything. Wars have been fought over less. Nations could rise or fall based on what this cup means to their people. The Pope finally speaks, his voice heavy with the weight of history. We must test this cup with every tool science has, but we must also prepare for the possibility that our faith is about to become sight. Outside the Vatican, crowds gather in St. Peter's Square. They hold candles and pray rosaries, while news helicopters circle overhead like mechanical vultures. The whole world watches Rome, waiting for the Church's decision. Will they embrace the Grail, Or will they reject it to protect 2,000 years of tradition? The debate continues as dawn breaks over the eternal city. In 12 hours, the Pope must give humanity an answer. Chapter 5. The world stops watching. In New York, the stock market opens and immediately crashes. Boeing stock plunges as airlines report that every flight to Jerusalem is booked solid for the next 6 months. Gold prices skyrocket as investors flee to safe havens, not knowing what this discovery means for the future of civilization. CNN breaks into regular programming with a red banner that reads, "Holy Grail discovered. Authentication continues." The anchor's voice shakes as she reads reports flooding in from around the world. In Mexico City, a cathedral fills with 10,000 people praying the rosary in unison. In London, Oxford professors debate on live television whether archaeology can prove God exists. But the real story unfolds in the streets. In Jerusalem, pilgrims arrive faster than the city can handle them. Hotels book up in minutes. Restaurants run out of food. The Israeli government closes the roads leading to the discovery site. But that doesn't stop people from walking across the desert, carrying water and hope in equal measure. Social media explodes with a force that crashes servers worldwide. The hashtag Holy Grail trends in 47 languages. Videos go viral, showing people weeping as they watch news coverage. Churches report their highest attendance since Christmas and Easter combined, while atheist websites struggle to explain what this might mean for their worldview. In small towns across America, church bells ring at random hours as pastors struggle to make sense of the discovery. In rural India, Christian minorities celebrate while Hindu neighbors ask questions about Jesus they never thought to ask before. In China, underground churches suddenly find courage to gather openly, declaring that God has revealed himself to the world. But perhaps the most telling moment comes when a child in Kenya asks her mother a simple question. If they found Jesus' cup, does that mean he was real? The mother has no answer, because neither does anyone else. Chapter 6. Crusades 2.0. The Imam's voice carries across the crowded mosque in Damascus as he declares the discovery a Western conspiracy designed to weaken Islam. They create false artifacts, he says, to make their prophets seem more real than ours. But even as he speaks, doubt creaks in his voice, because the authentication reports are too detailed to dismiss. In Jerusalem's old city, tensions rise like heat from summer stones. Jewish rabbis argue among themselves about whether Jesus was just another rabbi or something more. Some study the DNA reports and whisper about ancient prophecies. Others warn their people that this discovery will bring nothing but trouble to the Holy Land. The first violence erupts in Paris, where a group of Christian extremists attacks a mosque, claiming the Grail proves Christianity is the only true faith. Within hours, similar attacks happen in London, Detroit, and Sydney. Counterattacks follow, and suddenly the discovery that was supposed to bring peace becomes an excuse for ancient hatreds to boil over. In Iraq, a terrorist organization releases a video declaring holy war against the Grail worshippers. They claim the cup is cursed, and anyone who believes in it must die. Intelligence agencies around the world scramble to protect religious sites as threats pour in through encrypted channels. But the most dangerous reaction comes from a group calling itself the New Templars. They claim the Grail belongs to Christianity alone and must be protected from infidels and unbelievers. Their manifesto, posted on encrypted websites, calls for a new crusade to reclaim Jerusalem and establish a Christian kingdom around the holy cup. The irony is bitter and clear. The cup that Jesus used to preach love and forgiveness has become an excuse for hatred and violence. The Prince of Peace's most sacred relic now threatens to tear the world apart along religious lines that many thought had healed centuries ago. Chapter 7. The New Reformation. Pastor John Williams stands before his congregation in Atlanta, sweat beading on his forehead as he grips the pulpit. For 30 years, he's preached that faith doesn't need proof. Now, staring at faces hungry for answers, he doesn't know what to say about a God who apparently left his drinking cup behind as evidence. Some of you are asking if this cup changes what we believe, he says slowly. But I tell you, faith that needs a cup to survive was never faith at all. Half his congregation nods in agreement. The other half gets up and walks out, heading for the church down the street that embraces the Grail as God's gift to doubting humanity. Across America, denominations split like breaking glass. The Methodist Church divides into Grail Methodists and Faith Methodists. Baptist congregations argue so fiercely that some communities have 3 Baptist churches within a single block, each taking a different position on the cup's meaning. New movements spring up overnight. The Church of the Sacred Cup forms in California, claiming the Grail proves that Jesus was both human and divine in ways traditional Christianity never understood. The Grail seekers in Texas believe the cup is just the first of many divine artifacts waiting to be discovered. They fund archaeological expeditions across the Middle East, convinced that God left other treasures for humanity to find. But the most powerful new movement has no name and no buildings. It exists entirely online, where millions of people share their personal experiences of the Grail's discovery. They don't care about denominations or doctrines. They just know that something inside them changed when they learned that Jesus' cup was real. Traditional churches watch their membership numbers drop as people create their own spiritual communities. Seminary enrollment plummets as young ministers decide they don't need institutional training to understand what the Grail means to their personal relationship with God. Chapter 8. Miracles or Mass Hysteria. Maria Santos sits in her wheelchair outside the hospital in Mexico City, staring at her phone screen. The news app shows another photo of the Holy Grail, and something deep inside her chest begins to burn. She's been paralyzed for 8 years, but suddenly her legs feel warm. By evening, she's walking. Dr. Kim Peterson, the neurologist who treated Maria, has no explanation. The woman's spinal cord was severed in 3 places. Medical science says she should never walk again. But the MRI scans from the day after she saw the Grail photos show healthy tissue where scar tissue used to be. Reports flood in from around the world. A blind man in Nigeria claims his sight returned while praying about the Grail. Cancer patients in remission after viewing the discovery photos. Depression and anxiety cases dropping dramatically in areas where churches are holding special Grail prayer services. The medical community scrambles for answers. Dr. James Fuller, a psychiatrist at Harvard, proposes that the Grail's discovery triggers a massive placebo effect, causing the brain to heal the body through pure belief. Faith healing is real, he explains on national television, but it's psychology, not miracles. But other cases defy even psychological explanation. A child in Brazil, born deaf, begins hearing perfectly after her grandmother shows her pictures of the cup. Security cameras at a hospital in Germany capture a man's broken arm, healing completely in less than 12 hours, right after the hospital's chaplain conducts a Grail blessing service. The Vatican quietly dispatches teams of doctors and theologians to investigate the most dramatic cases. They find some explainable by psychology, some by coincidence, and some by outright fraud. But a small number resist every scientific explanation, leaving even skeptical church investigators shaken. Critics point out that similar healing reports don't come from non-Christian areas. If the Grail's power was divine, argues Dr. Sarah Mitchell, head of the American Skeptic Society, wouldn't it heal everyone equally, regardless of their beliefs? The question haunts believers and skeptics alike. Is faith healing people, or is something else entirely at work? Chapter 9. The Grail Guardians. In a windowless room beneath the streets of Edinburgh, 12 people in dark robes gather around a table that hasn't been used for public meetings in over 300 years. The man at the head of the table holds a letter written in code, his hands shaking as he reads aloud. The false Grail has been revealed. It is time to protect the true one. The Priory of Sion has operated in secret since the Crusades, or so they claim. Members include university professors, wealthy businessmen, and at least one member of European royalty who cannot be named. They've spent centuries protecting what they believe is the real Holy Grail, hidden in a location known only to their highest leaders. The cup they found in Jerusalem is a clever fake, declares Margaret Ashworth, an Oxford historian and 30-year Priory member. Our Grail carries the bloodline of Christ himself. The other is just pottery and propaganda. But they're not the only group making such claims. In France, the Knights Templar Restored announced that they've guarded the authentic Grail for 700 years. In Scotland, the Order of the Sacred Chalice produces documents suggesting their cup was given to them by Joseph of Arimathea himself. Each group has evidence, ancient documents, historical lineages, and artifacts that seem to support their claims. The Templars show photographs of a golden cup covered in gemstones. The Scottish Order displays a simple wooden bowl that radiates an otherworldly warmth. The Priory guards their treasure so carefully that even members have never seen it. Conspiracy theorists have a field day. Internet forums explode with theories about secret societies, government cover-ups, and ancient bloodlines. Some claim the Jerusalem discovery is a distraction orchestrated by the Illuminati to hide the real Grail's location. Others insist that there are dozens of authentic Grails scattered across the world, each one a piece of a larger divine puzzle. The truth becomes impossible to separate from fiction as competing claims multiply faster than investigators can check them. Chapter 10. Science versus Sacred. Dr. Rebecca Torres stares at the readout from her quantum scanner and shakes her head in disbelief. According to her instruments, the molecules in the Holy Grail are arranged in patterns that shouldn't exist in nature. The carbon atoms show signs of quantum entanglement on a macro scale, something that physics says is impossible. We need to run more tests, she tells the international committee overseeing the Grail's study. Destructive tests. We need to take samples for analysis. The room falls silent. Religious representatives look horrified at the suggestion of cutting pieces from Christianity's most sacred relic. Cardinal Martinez stands slowly, his voice heavy with authority. This cup may contain the blood of our Lord. You're asking us to wound it for the sake of curiosity. But Dr. Torres isn't backing down. Science has given you carbon dating, DNA analysis, and authentication that proves this cup is what you claim it is. Now you want to stop us from understanding how it works. She gestures to her instruments. This artifact is exhibiting properties that could revolutionize physics, medicine, and our understanding of consciousness itself. The battle lines are drawn. Scientists argue that understanding the Grail's unusual properties could unlock secrets about the nature of reality, consciousness, and perhaps even life after death. Religious leaders counter that some mysteries are meant to remain mysterious and that faith requires the unknown. Protesters gather outside the research facility in Jerusalem, holding signs that read, "Don't dissect Jesus," and "Faith needs no proof." Counter-protesters demand science for all and truth through testing. The debate reaches the United Nations, where delegates argue about humanity's right to understand versus humanity's duty to preserve. Some countries threaten to withdraw funding if destructive testing proceeds. Others promise additional resources if science is allowed to proceed without religious interference. Meanwhile, the Grail sits in its climate-controlled chamber, surrounded by more security than most nuclear weapons, while humanity argues about whether God's mysteries should remain mysterious. Chapter 11. The Lost Gospels Speak. Brother Marcus has spent 30 years copying ancient manuscripts in a monastery library that most people don't even know exists. But today, his hands shake as he opens a text that collectors have been trying to buy for decades, the complete Gospel of Philip, including sections that scholars thought were lost forever. "Look at this passage," he whispers to the biblical authentication team that flew in from Rome. Philip writes about the cup that holds eternity, which the teacher blessed with his own breath. The description matches the Jerusalem discovery perfectly, down to the wood grain pattern. Suddenly, texts that the early church rejected as heretical become vitally important. The Acts of Pilate describes a cup used at the crucifixion. The Gospel of Mary mentions a vessel that contains the essence of the divine made flesh. Ancient manuscripts that have gathered dust in monastery basements and private collections are now worth more than entire nations' treasures. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, a specialist in early Christian writings, explains the significance. For centuries, we've only had the 4 canonical Gospels to tell us about Jesus' life. But there were dozens of other texts written by people who claimed to know him personally. The Church rejected these writings in the 4th century, calling them false or dangerous. But now, with the Grail's discovery, these rejected texts gain new credibility. The Gospel of Thomas describes Jesus saying, "I am the wine, and the cup that holds me is made holy by my presence." The secret book of John mentions a sacred vessel that bridges the gap between earth and heaven. Treasure hunters and manuscript dealers go into overdrive, scouring libraries, private collections, and archaeological sites for any text that might reference the Grail. Prices for ancient documents skyrocket as collectors compete for anything that might shed new light on Christianity's most important artifact. The Vatican faces an uncomfortable question. If these heretical texts accurately describe the Grail, what else might they be right about? And if the early church fathers rejected true accounts in favor of incomplete ones, what does that mean for modern Christian doctrine? Chapter 12. Mary Magdalene's Revenge. Dr. Sarah Blackwood has been fighting for women's recognition in biblical scholarship for 20 years, and now she holds a document that might change everything. In her hands is a newly discovered fragment from the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, and the passage she's reading makes her heart race. Mary took the cup from the teacher's hands, the ancient Coptic text reads, and he said to her, "You alone understand what this vessel truly contains. Guard it well, for through you the truth shall be preserved." This isn't just another gospel reference to the Grail. It suggests that Mary Magdalene, not the male apostles, was the original keeper of Christianity's most sacred relic. Feminist theologians around the world celebrate as other texts surface supporting this narrative. The Gospel of Philip, long dismissed as Gnostic heresy, describes Mary as Jesus' closest companion and spiritual equal. The Pistis Sophia shows her receiving secret teachings that the male disciples couldn't understand. For 2,000 years, the Church has portrayed Mary Magdalene as a repentant prostitute, Dr. Blackwood explains to a packed auditorium at Harvard. But these texts show her as Jesus' most trusted follower, possibly his spiritual successor, and potentially the original guardian of the Holy Grail. The implications ripple through Christianity like earthquake shockwaves. If Mary was the Grail's first keeper, then women have been excluded from their rightful place in Christian leadership for millennia. Suddenly, arguments for female priests, bishops, and even a female pope gain historical backing that's hard to dismiss. New movements spring up overnight. The Church of Mary Magdalene forms in California, led by female ministers who claim direct spiritual descent from the original Grail keeper. The Sisters of the Sacred Cup establish monasteries where women study the suppressed texts and practice forms of Christianity that honor the feminine divine. Traditional church leaders push back hard, calling these interpretations dangerous fantasies and attacks on biblical truth. But they can't ignore the growing movement of Christian women who see in Mary Magdalene's story their own liberation from centuries of religious oppression. Chapter 13. Eastern Wisdom Awakens. The Dalai Lama's statement surprises everyone. This cup your archaeologists found. It confirms what Buddha taught about the nature of suffering and compassion. Jesus understood the same truths we teach, but expressed them through different symbols. In monasteries across Tibet, Buddhist monks study news reports of the Grail discovery with intense interest. They see parallels between Jesus' use of the cup to teach about spiritual transformation and Buddha's own teachings about the vessel of consciousness that holds enlightenment. The cup is not important because it touched divine lips, explains Lama Tenzin, a respected teacher in Dharamshala. It is important because it represents the human heart, which can hold infinite love and compassion. Jesus knew this. Buddha knew this. The cup is just a symbol of truth that transcends any single religion. Hindu gurus point to ancient Sanskrit texts that describe sacred vessels used in spiritual practices thousands of years before Jesus was born. The Rig Veda mentions cups that hold the nectar of immortality. The Bhagavad Gita describes Krishna offering spiritual wine that transforms consciousness. These Eastern interpretations disturb many Christians who want the Grail to prove Christianity's unique truth. But they comfort others who see the discovery as evidence that all genuine spiritual paths lead to the same divine reality. In India, a remarkable interfaith movement emerges around the Grail. Hindu temples, Buddhist monasteries, and Christian churches organize joint prayer services, claiming that the cup represents universal spiritual truth rather than sectarian religious doctrine. The movement spreads to the West, where meditation centers and yoga studios hold Grail consciousness sessions that blend Christian mysticism with Eastern practices. These groups argue that Jesus was teaching the same enlightenment principles as Buddha and Krishna, just using different cultural language. Traditional religious leaders from all faiths condemn this syncretism as dangerous compromise. But millions of spiritual seekers embrace the idea that the Grail bridges ancient wisdom traditions, proving that divine truth transcends the boundaries humans build around it. Chapter 14. The Pagan Connection. Dr. Andreas Müller's discovery in the basement of the Berlin Museum changes everything. Hidden in a storage box labeled Celtic Artifacts, Various, is a bronze cup that looks remarkably similar to the Jerusalem Grail, but this one is dated to 200 BCE, over 2 centuries before Jesus was born. The design patterns are nearly identical, Dr. Muller explains to a shocked gathering of archaeologists. The cup from Jerusalem shows clear signs of having been modeled after much older Celtic ritual vessels. Carbon dating confirms his worst fears. The Grail's basic design predates Christianity by hundreds of years. Research teams scramble across Europe and the Middle East, uncovering similar cups used in ancient Druidic ceremonies, Roman mystery religions, and Egyptian death rituals. The evidence piles up like an avalanche. Sacred cups that transform liquid into divine essence weren't invented by Christianity. They were borrowed from much older pagan traditions. This doesn't make the Jerusalem cup less authentic, insists Dr. Helen Foster, a specialist in religious syncretism. But it does mean that Jesus was using symbols and rituals that already had deep spiritual meaning in the ancient world. Christianity didn't emerge in a vacuum. It grew from soil prepared by thousands of years of human spiritual experience. The discovery horrifies Christian fundamentalists who believe their faith is unique and divinely revealed. If the Grail's design comes from pagan sources, what does that say about Christian claims to exclusive truth? But religious historians aren't surprised. They've long known that early Christianity absorbed elements from surrounding cultures: Christmas traditions from Roman Saturnalia, Easter symbols from fertility goddesses, and saint stories from local heroes and gods. The real question becomes, does borrowing from older traditions make Christianity less true? Or does it show that human beings have always recognized the same spiritual realities, just expressed them through different cultural forms? As news of the pagan connections spreads, some Christians abandon their faith entirely, claiming they've been deceived. Others embrace a more inclusive understanding of divine revelation that honors truth wherever it appears, even in pre-Christian sources. Chapter 15: The Blood Revelation. Dr. Patricia Chen stares at her computer screen in absolute silence, reading the DNA analysis results for the 3rd time. Her team has spent 6 months analyzing the blood residue from the Holy Grail, using the most advanced genetic sequencing technology ever created. The results are impossible, but they're also undeniable. The blood shows normal human male genetics, she explains to the International Research Committee, her voice barely above a whisper. But there are anomalies we can't explain, chromosomal patterns that don't match any known human population, and the DNA shows signs of extraordinary longevity, as if the cells were designed to survive far longer than normal biological material. But the real shock comes in the detailed analysis. The blood contains genetic markers that suggest the person it came from had unusual resistance to aging, disease, and cellular breakdown. In simple terms, whoever bled into this cup had biology that seemed designed for a much longer lifespan than normal humans experience. Are you saying this person was genetically different from the rest of humanity? Asks Cardinal Martinez, his face pale with the implications. Dr. Chen nods slowly. The genetics suggests someone who was fully human, but optimized in ways we don't understand, as if human DNA was taken and perfected somehow. The theological implications explode like nuclear bombs in religious communities worldwide. If Jesus was genetically unique, what does that mean for Christian teaching about his humanity? Was he a normal man touched by God, or was his divine nature somehow encoded in his very DNA? Scientists propose theories ranging from ancient genetic engineering to natural mutation to divine intervention that operated through biological processes. Religious leaders struggle to reconcile these findings, with 2,000 years of doctrine about Jesus' dual nature as fully human and fully divine. But perhaps the most disturbing discovery comes when Dr. Chen runs the blood through databases designed to trace family lineages. The results suggest genetic connections to bloodlines that still exist today, scattered across Europe and the Middle East, in families that have no idea of their possible connection to Christianity's central figure. Chapter 16: Digital Pilgrimages. Sarah Williams puts on her VR headset in her living room in Ohio and suddenly finds herself standing in the chamber where the Holy Grail was discovered. The virtual reality experience is so realistic, she can smell the ancient stone and feel the cool air on her skin. She reaches out to touch the cup, and for a moment, she swears she can feel its power. This is the future of pilgrimage, explains Dr. Mark Rodriguez, the tech entrepreneur who created the Grail VR experience. Why spend thousands of dollars and weeks of travel when you can have an authentic spiritual encounter from your own home? Within months, the virtual Grail attracts over 50 million visitors. People from every continent log in to experience what they can't afford to visit in person. The technology is so advanced that many report the same emotional and spiritual responses they would feel from seeing the actual artifact. But technology does more than just democratize access to the Grail. Artificial intelligence systems analyze thousands of ancient texts in minutes, discovering references to holy cups that human scholars missed in centuries of study. Quantum computers model the cup's atomic structure, revealing molecular patterns that suggest it was crafted using techniques unknown to first-century artisans. Blockchain technology creates an unhackable record of the Grail's authenticity, while satellite imagery helps archaeologists locate other sites where similar artifacts might be hidden. Social media algorithms connect believers around the world, creating virtual religious communities that transcend traditional denominational boundaries. The most surprising development comes from AI analysis of the cup's physical properties. Machine learning systems detect microscopic patterns in the wood grain that seem to encode information, almost like a divine QR code embedded in the artifact itself. We're seeing patterns that suggest intentional design at a level beyond human capability, explains Dr. Lisa Park, a quantum physicist working on the project. Either first-century craftsmen had technology we don't understand, or this cup was created by intelligence far beyond human capacity. The digital revolution transforms how humanity interacts with the sacred, making the Grail more accessible than any religious artifact in history, while raising new questions about the nature of authentic spiritual experience. Chapter 17: The New Jerusalem. The emergency session of the United Nations Security Council convenes at 3 a.m. as world leaders grapple with a crisis no one saw coming. 3 different nations claim the right to house the Holy Grail permanently. Israel argues it was found on their soil. Italy claims Vatican authority over Christian relics. And Britain insists the Grail belongs at Glastonbury, where legend says Joseph of Arimathea first brought it. This artifact belongs to all humanity, declares Secretary General Williams. But we must decide where it can be kept safely while remaining accessible to the world's 2 billion Christians. The debate rages for 18 hours as diplomats argue over international law, religious authority, and cultural heritage rights. Tourism projections show that whichever country houses the Grail could see economic benefits worth hundreds of billions of dollars annually. The stakes are too high for compromise. Meanwhile, intelligence agencies report chatter about terrorist plots targeting the artifact. The Islamic State releases a video declaring the Grail a false idol that must be destroyed. Christian extremist groups threaten to steal it if it's placed in the wrong location. Even secular terrorist organizations see the cup as a symbol of religious oppression worth eliminating. Security experts estimate it would cost over $50 million annually just to protect the Grail from theft or destruction. The facility would need military-grade defenses, climate control systems, and screening technology more advanced than most airports use. We're talking about protecting the most valuable object in human history, explains former CIA Director Robert Hayes. The Mona Lisa seems like pocket change compared to this. Every religious extremist, treasure hunter, and apocalyptic cult on Earth would see stealing or destroying this cup as their ticket to eternal glory. The United Nations proposes creating an international sacred heritage zone in Jerusalem, governed by representatives from major world religions and funded by global contributions. But even this compromise faces opposition from groups that believe their faith should have exclusive control over Christianity's most important relic. As debates continue, the Grail sits in a temporary facility that costs over $1 million per month to operate, guarded by more security than most heads of state receive. Chapter 18: Faith in the Information Age. Pastor David Kim stares at his empty church in Seoul and wonders where everyone went. 3 months ago, his congregation filled every seat. Now, barely 50 people show up for Sunday service, and most of them are over 60 years old. The younger members have found something else: online Grail communities, where they create their own interpretations of what the discovery means. "Why do we need pastors anymore?" asks Jenny Martinez, a former Sunday school teacher who now leads an online group called Grail Seekers. "We have access to the same ancient texts, the same archaeological reports, and the same DNA analysis as any seminary graduate. We can study the Grail's meaning for ourselves." Traditional religious authority crumbles as believers armed with internet access challenge doctrines that stood unchallenged for centuries. Megachurch pastors lose influence to YouTube theologians who analyze the Grail discovery using skills learned from Wikipedia and Google Scholar rather than formal religious training. The most popular religious influencer is Maria Santos, a former accountant from Mexico who started making videos about the Grail from her kitchen table. Her channel has 12 million subscribers who tune in weekly to hear her common sense interpretations of how the discovery affects everyday faith. She has no theological training, but her followers trust her more than bishops and cardinals. Seminary enrollment drops by 60% as young people decide they don't need institutional credentials to understand God's truth. Online ordination programs flourish, allowing anyone to become a minister by completing internet courses and paying modest fees. Traditional churches fight back by emphasizing the importance of community worship and pastoral guidance, but they're losing the battle for attention. Why sit in uncomfortable pews listening to rehearsed sermons when you can explore the Grail's meaning through interactive online experiences designed specifically for your learning style? The democratization of religious authority accelerates as social media algorithms connect like-minded believers across traditional denominational boundaries. Catholics find they have more in common with certain Baptists than with liberal Catholics. Methodists discover their beliefs align more closely with Eastern Orthodox theology than with progressive Methodist positions. Chapter 19: What does your soul believe? Tonight, as the world continues debating what the Holy Grail means for humanity, the most important question isn't being asked by theologians or scientists or world leaders. It's being whispered in bedrooms and pondered during morning commutes and discussed over dinner tables in languages spoken by billions of people who will never see the cup in person.
The question is simple, but it cuts to the core of human existence. What do you believe now?
For Maria, the grandmother in Brazil, whose arthritis disappeared after praying with Grail images, the answer is clear. God is real, and miracles still happen. For Dr. James, the geneticist who found impossible DNA patterns in the holy blood, faith and science have collided in ways that challenge.